Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the earth in forgotten graveyards? What whispers might echo through time, carried on the chill night air? Prepare yourself, dear viewer, for a tale that will chill you to your very core. The old Millbrook Cemetery had long been abandoned, its weathered headstones barely visible beneath a tangle of overgrown weeds and gnarled tree roots. Local legend spoke of strange occurrences, eerie lights dancing among the graves at midnight, disembodied whispers carried on the wind, and an oppressive sense of dread that seemed to seep from the very ground itself. For generations, the townsfolk of Millbrook had given the cemetery a wide berth, content to let its secrets remain buried. But progress waits for no one, and when plans were announced to build a new housing development on the outskirts of town, the forgotten graveyard stood directly in its path. Sarah Chen, a young archaeologist specializing in historical preservation, arrived in Millbrook on a crisp autumn morning. Her task was simple: oversee the respectful relocation of any remains to a new site, clearing the way for construction to begin. As she pulled up to the rusty gates of the cemetery, a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool air. "It's just an old boneyard," she muttered to herself, trying to shake off the growing unease. But as Sarah pushed open the creaking gate and took her first steps onto the hallowed ground, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. The excavation began the following day. Sarah's team worked methodically, carefully unearthing centuries-old coffins and cataloguing their contents. But with each grave they opened, Sarah's discomfort grew. The bones they found were wrong somehow, misshapen, and always, there were scratch marks on the inside of the coffin lids. As the sun began to set on that first day, one of Sarah's assistants called out in alarm. They had uncovered something unexpected, a second layer of graves beneath the first, far older and cruder in construction. Sarah's heart raced as she knelt to examine the discovery. These weren't orderly burials, but bodies haphazardly thrown into mass graves, their bones bearing clear signs of violence. "What happened here?" Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of a skull split by an ancient axe blow. That night, as Sarah pored over historical records in her rented room above the local pub, she began to piece together a horrifying picture. Millbrook hadn't always been the quaint New England town it appeared to be. Centuries ago, it had been home to a secretive cult, one that practiced rituals too terrible to name. The deeper Sarah dug into the town's history, the more gruesome the story became. The cult had believed in human sacrifice, in dark magic fueled by blood and pain. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, the true horror lay in what they did after death. According to fragmented accounts Sarah uncovered, the cult's leaders had developed a perverse ritual they believed would grant them immortality. They would bury their victims alive, but not before force-feeding them a concoction of herbs and toxins that would keep them conscious long after they should have suffocated or starved. The cultists believed that by trapping a soul between life and death, they could harness its energy to extend their own lives. Sarah's hands shook as she read the faded text. It couldn't be true. It was too monstrous to comprehend. But as she thought back to those scratch marks inside the coffins, a wave of nausea washed over her. The next morning, Sarah returned to the dig site with renewed determination. She had to know the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. As her team continued their careful excavation, she focused on the older graves, searching for any evidence that might confirm or disprove the horrifying theory forming in her mind. It was mid-afternoon when they made the discovery that would change everything. Buried deep beneath layers of earth and stone, they uncovered a chamber. The air that escaped as they breached its seal was fetid, carrying the stench of decay that had festered for centuries. Sarah's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in grotesque symbols and faded paintings depicting unspeakable acts. But it was what lay in the center of the room that drew her attention and turned her blood to ice. There, on a crude stone altar, lay a body. But not a skeleton, not the desiccated remains one would expect after centuries underground. No, this body looked fresh. Its skin was pale and waxy, its chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Sarah stumbled backward, her mind reeling. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be real. But as she watched in horror, the figure's eyes snapped open, milky white and unseeing. A scream tore from Sarah's throat as chaos erupted around her. Her team scrambled to escape the chamber, but Sarah found herself rooted to the spot, unable to tear her gaze away from the nightmare before her. The figure on the altar slowly sat up, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth filed to points, and a sound emerged that would haunt Sarah's dreams for years to come. A raspy, desperate wail that spoke of centuries of torment. In that moment, Sarah understood the true horror of what had been done in this place. The cultists hadn't just killed their victims, they had trapped them in a state of undeath, neither truly alive nor allowed the peace of true death. And now, disturbed from their ancient slumber, they were awakening. The ground beneath Sarah's feet began to tremble as more and more of the trapped souls stirred. Hands, desiccated but still moving, burst from the earth, clawing their way towards the surface. The air filled with a cacophony of moans and screams, the voices of hundreds of tortured souls crying out for release. Sarah ran. She ran as she had never run before, her lungs burning as she scrambled over fallen headstones and ducked beneath grasping skeletal hands that erupted from the earth around her. Behind her, she could hear the shrieks of her team, of townspeople who had come to see what the commotion was about. But it was too late. The evil that had been buried for so long had been unleashed, and it would not be easily contained again. In the days that followed, Millbrook became a war zone. The military was called in, the town quarantined as they tried desperately to contain the horror that had been unleashed. But how do you fight an enemy that's already dead? How do you kill something that has existed in agony for centuries, driven mad by its torment? Sarah survived, one of the few to escape the initial outbreak, but she would never be the same. The knowledge of what she had uncovered, of the suffering that had been inflicted in that quiet New England town, would haunt her for the rest of her days, and always, in the back of her mind, was the terrifying question: how many other towns held similar secrets? How many other graveyards concealed horrors beyond imagination, just waiting to be awakened? As she sat in a sterile government facility, recounting her story for the umpteenth time to grim-faced officials, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The dark secrets of the buried graveyard had been exposed, but at what cost? And what other nightmares might be lurking just beneath the surface of our world, waiting for their chance to emerge? Remember, dear viewer, that some things are buried for a reason. Some secrets are meant to stay hidden. The next time you pass an old, overgrown cemetery, listen closely. You might just hear the whispers of those trapped between worlds, begging for release or hungering for your soul. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. But the night is long, and there are more terrifying tales to be told. If you dare to delve deeper into the darkness, like and subscribe for more chilling stories that will keep you up at night. And remember, sometimes death is not the end. It's only the beginning.